Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creative Lab, another episode. I'm sorry, the Creative Minds. Why am I? I'm into the lab. Um, we are going to talk today about measurements, about how is it that we measure campaigns and all the work that people do around marketing. And alongside with me, as always, Stuart. Hey, welcome to the lab.
Hi, Flavio. It's great to be back. It's a remote lab this time again. Uh, but yeah, as I think this topic is of great interest to everybody because we put a lot of time and energy into our marketing and our campaigns. We were obviously just before the show, we were chatting about some of the activities we've been involved in over the past 12 months and sharing what's going on. But there's little point in doing all of that work unless at some point you take stock and try to figure out which of those activities you've undertaken is really working and which ones are maybe working less well. And then it's a question of deciding, do we continue doing it, but we look at how we can improve it, or do we knock that on the head and then invest our time and energies in the things that seem to be working better and improve those instead? And I'm really excited to chat again to Wendy. We haven't seen each other for such a long time. It's great to see her here on the video and find out her experiences and what she can share with us.
That's right. And so welcome, Wendy. Wendy Covey is with us today from Austin, Texas. Wendy is a CEO and co-founder of True Marketing. Also wrote a book, is a podcaster. I mean, you're doing marketing for your own company and marketing for others. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
That's awesome. I think it's amazing to me when I read ads for marketing, anybody who wants to who hires for marketing, the first thing that they want is somebody who's analytic, somebody who knows how to go through all the different platforms, Google, inbound, and CRMs and everything. All seems to be about statistics and about measurements and measuring everything that is being done, even though marketing at the base is a creative task. So it's kind of like an interesting element. How does this go into marketing strategy for you, Wendy? How do you see measurements becoming so important over the last months or years even?
Well, at True Marketing, we work with companies targeting technical audiences, and often the leadership or engineers who are in positions like vice president of sales and marketing or the president of the company. And so they're by nature very analytic people. So it's very important when working with this type of person to be able to have those metrics to just put data behind your actions. And but it's also important for the marketer to actually know, as you say, what's working, what's not working. Stuart, you put it really well. Where should we divest efforts? Where should we double down? So I love that now in this day and time, we have so many measurements at our fingertips. If we think back to the 80s and the 90s, not to date myself, but I remember back in the day, you would run print ads and you would have these little reply cards and printed, publications called bingos, that people would fill out. And boy, we've just come such a long way from those times where we can really see how people are behaving, how they're interacting with our websites, with our emails, with our social accounts, and getting a full picture of how we're influencing purchases. And that really changes the conversation, not only with leadership, but also with the sales team.
Mm-hmm.
And this is sorry, go ahead, Stuart.
I was going to say, how is it in your experience at the moment? Because one of the areas where we work most deeply, I think, is probably in the electronics industry. And obviously there's a very complicated design cycle. It's quite long. What I decide to use as a chip today might not actually be purchased for another year's time. So how much success are sort of like semiconductor vendors and electronics manufacturers having linking the marketing activities they're doing today to those sales, which are so far out?
Yeah, so great question. So first, the recognition that there's a design win and then a production win, and those sales cycles will look a little bit different. And so identifying where that contact is in that sales cycle is helpful. and then seeing again the touch points they go through. And in particular, when you have a long sales cycle like this, it's so important to nurture that contact. And sometimes electronics companies make the mistake of having that only be sales responsibility, and it becomes really inefficient. When it's hard for them to remember, and they have ticklers and things like that. And I'm not saying there's not a place for sales to do that, but there's also an efficient vehicle through your e-newsletter to keep those people warm, to stay top of mind, and to be relevant. If you can identify which cycle they're in, maybe you can customize that content a bit to make sure that you're speaking to the right audience with the right content, frankly.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting discussion here, because we're talking about, obviously here the discussion we have is a very B2B oriented discussion. And during the different episodes that we had, there's been people that were advocating saying B2B is such a myth and has its own way of doing things. And what we found is that in fact B2C, the retail industry, has been much more data driven and much more, I would say, at the forefront of marketing, and B2B came behind. From a data standpoint, because the retail industry is using different measurements, they are also looking at marketing with a whole lot of data before that. And do you see, Wendy, a relationship between B2B and B2C into your clients or into your area of operation?
Yeah, the biggest relationship I see is if you think about a B2B buyer, they're still a human, they're still a person, they're still a consumer in their private life. And B2C companies are training us to interact certain ways. So, for example, banking, right? We now use the chat function and we now bank online, and we're not driving up and walking into our local bank anymore. And so, as we learn to use chat in our private lives, just to pick on chat, you see adoption increasing on the B2B side. So while B2B lags in some areas, and I think chat's a really good example of that, as it becomes more acceptable practice, and more, I guess, practice we're used to in our private lives, you see it spilling over. But I do think it's important for the marketer, particularly in electronics or other technical industries, to understand the difference in these buyers. Because when I think about the decision that these engineers are making, if they choose the wrong product, say something that's not as reliable, someone's life can be affected, literally can be a life and death decision. And so much more thoughtfulness goes into the buyer's journey than maybe deciding what, shoes to wear this summer. So
Yeah.
there's definitely some differences as well.
Yeah, I mean, we had in one of the episodes we had of talking about branding, we had Richard Parkinson, who basically said, um, stop looking at numbers all the time, just be creative. But on the other hand, there is also the discussion about looking at, I mean, coming from a branding standpoint, obviously it is important being creative, and the measurements. People go on social media and they want likes and they want shares and they want uh, it, there's so much of data that is out there that sifting through it takes a lot of time. And then depending on the audience or the channel you use, you've got to pick the right elements of measurements. Not all measurements are valid, and maybe not all measurements are, I would say, pertinent to a specific area or a specific audience. From that standpoint, can you give our audience a few pointers? I mean, for example, we talked with a previous episode. They said if you post anything on social media in India, you'll get tons of likes. If you post that in Hong Kong, you'll get 0 likes, right? And it doesn't mean that.
Just
It doesn't mean
behavioral.
right. It's behavioral, right? And
Yeah.
so how the audience is impacting the measurement.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a great question. And I think your regional example is very interesting. So, why are you on social media in the first place? And what are you looking to get out of that? Let's just take a step back and say, what are the goals? What is this tied to? Is it awareness? Is it trust building? Is it thought leadership? And then how can you tie appropriate metrics to that goal? So to me, when I look at my own LinkedIn, I'm looking for thought leadership. I'm looking to have engagement. And so I'm looking at who shared my post, who gave a thoughtful response to my post, and how can I thoughtfully respond back to that and start a dialogue. And I know that LinkedIn rewards that. The more interaction you have, the more it's going to surface in their network and in my network. And it's more meaningful and it leads to sales. Whereas, having, let's say, people at my company like my post, well, that's really nice of them, but that doesn't really go anywhere. So I think marketers in general, it can be a slippery slope. Like you said, when you have access to so much data and you need to take a step back and say, what is our strategy here? What goals are we tying this to? What should I report to leadership and sales? And what's for me to diagnose whether or not my efforts are successful? And what are the metrics that I use to troubleshoot? So there's sort of 3 layers of metrics, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges as a marketer today is quite simply the number of channels that are available. As you said at the beginning, sort of like back in the old days when we were all a little bit younger, the main focus of attention was to get people to respond through print magazines. And nowadays we've got so many different social media channels. If I just look at some of the things that I interact with, we've got Google Analytics or Matomo on the website. Then, of course, LinkedIn and Xing here in Germany remains relatively popular for business social media. Then you've got things like Twitter and Instagram, potentially TikTok, and so on and so forth. Each of these seems to have its own metrics, but there doesn't seem to be any way of bringing all of that data together very successfully in order that it seems to be, especially for a small to medium-sized business, where you don't have a lot of people to turn to, you're almost doing everything yourself. You seem to be having to go into everything and analyzing one piece at a time. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Well, we have some shortcuts, and there's no perfect tool out there that has all the metrics that you need. But we use a marketing automation tool. We use HubSpot. There's others, but that at least provides us with one place to look at many different things. So our web metrics, our email metrics, our social metrics. Now, when I say nothing's perfect, one of the downsides, for instance, is one of our strategies, I'll just pick on True Marketing, is that it's not all about the company posting. It's about me as the leader of the company engaging. And to do that effectively, I'm engaging directly with LinkedIn, and HubSpot isn't measuring, the effectiveness of all of that. So we still need to go to multiple tools. But for, I would say, the basics of how our website's performing, emails performing, we can do a lot within that one platform, and that saves us quite a bit of time.
And just earlier you were talking about product marketers and marketers, how they look about positioning products. We had a discussion a couple of episodes back with Susanne Trautmann, and part of the discussion was what's the interaction between product marketers and marketing, and how that work together. And obviously, because of the amount of data that is out there today, it's easy to get bogged down into analyzing those into spreadsheets after spreadsheets and graphs, and not knowing anymore what is important about how to position the right product into the right audience. And data is a big element of that. But I think what I've found many times is that people just jump from one chart to another, just reading them, but not taking the time to analyze them, to understand them, and then to make conclusions out of it and make adjustments or take specific initiatives. How do you see that happening?
So glad you brought this up, because To me, what this speaks to is utilizing campaigns, right? An integrated set of activities towards a common goal. And a product launch or working with a product manager is such a perfect example of that. So, you have your health metrics of the overall performance of marketing, right? Are visits on the rise? Am I doing well in organic search? Those are kind of basic things we all need to mind the shop on. But really, okay, say visits are down. Like, what does that mean? What do I do about that? Well, really, what you need to be looking are your campaigns that are actively running. So if you have a product launch and you're working with this product manager, how do we define success of this campaign? Is it demos? Is it leads? Is it awareness? Is it article placements? How are we measuring success? What are those KPIs? And then if at the macro level you're having issues, you can then look to your campaigns to say, oh, well, this campaign's really healthy. It's blown it out of the water. This other campaign is lagging. So we need to give it the attention, figure out, is our messaging off? Are our tactics off? What's happening here?
That's right. Those A/B approaches, comparing two different approaches on the same theme and then running it. What I found is that many times people basically, it's like a learning curve inside the company, because you need to know your own products, you need to know your own audiences.
Yeah.
It's not something you can easily export from the outside. It's literally testing the waters and doing a discovery process and learning out of it, right?
Absolutely. And also talking to customers. One of the favorite things that we do when we're working on, for instance, brand positioning and messaging, is interview customers to hear the words they use to describe the company, describe the solution, and then compare those words against what we're hearing internally about what their differentiators are. And sometimes there's a beautiful alignment and sometimes not so much. And then let's say in the case where there's non-alignment, that's a great vehicle to then test those messages, test to see what works, and then come back and retool along the way.
What is it that holds companies back from providing access to customers? Because I've often said exactly the same thing. It's like, well, let's talk to some of your customers, let's get feedback from them, or can we at least talk to your sales guys and see what that they say the customers say to them? That'll be at least a halfway house. But there seems to be this huge reticence to go that far. Why are we so scared of actually of hearing reality?
Right. That's a good question, and it doesn't seem logical to me either. But I know there are times when they say, "Well, it's proprietary. Our solution's proprietary. They don't want to talk publicly," and so we have to sort of get over that hurdle to say, "No, no, no. This will only be used internally for these reasons." But sometimes it's just a trust issue, and maybe being protective over that relationship. And what we try to remind companies is your customers are more likely to talk with honesty when they're talking to a third party than they're talking to their buddy account manager or sales guy. And so you might get more honest feedback if you have us come in and handle this interview. And that usually opens up some eyes to the process.
Mm-hmm.
And this adds to the discussion about having brand ambassadors and product ambassadors into the company that are talking. We had also an episode about that. And what we found is that so many companies are listening so much about what's happening on the outside, but they are not listening to what's happening on the inside. And like you said, Wendy, they are not matching the two together. And that those brand ambassadors have to learn about how to listen and report the data back. Do you have like a format, or have you worked with clients where you are having some sort of a harmony between the data that comes in from the inside and the outside, or the way that the data is being gathered so it is usable for a specific topic?
Yeah, so generally we do this as part of brand positioning and messaging, so a service that we deliver. And so we have what we call internal homework questions. So we'll have a set of questions that different people within the organization fill out. And sometimes, in addition, we'll interview salespeople or even board members and leadership. And then separately, we'll take those same questions out to interview customers. It's usually a 20 to 30-minute interview. We try not to be too abusive of anyone's time. And then we put all of that together. We pull out meaningful quotes, and we also look at terms or words that kept coming up. And so we sort and cluster those words. And then imagine you have a branding committee. So we discuss what came out of these conversations. So it's very qualitative. It's a qualitative research, not quantitative process. But you can imagine it's pretty meaningful to then map these to how we should evolve messaging within the organization.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things obviously we're looking at here is likes and shares and all these statistics and metrics. And I've also got a copy of your book here on content marketing engineered, which I think is actually brilliant. And I was just wondering if you could take us through, for somebody who's, they're trying to see the wood for the trees, they've got all these different things going on. What's a good way to start to look at what you have and then to build up some sort of matrix of like a measurement scorecard, as you recommend in the book? What's a good sort of first step?
Yeah, so I would start with analyzing your current state. So how are you performing? How are you perceived? So some of this is messaging, which we spoke about, and others is, how is your website performing? How are you doing at social? And so looking at that current state and then doing a SWOT analysis, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We find so much value out of that SWOT conversation because it focuses on both internal perceptions and internal careabouts, as well as what's happening externally, like competitive threats. And then from that, we can prioritize marketing goals and then take those into campaigns, identify KPIs. So how do you measure those campaigns? And then the final step is to put together that scorecard. And the scorecard should really be a high level, way to measure the health of marketing, separate from your deeper dive metrics of, am I doing well as a company on LinkedIn? That's a way to measure that channel, but it really doesn't tie back to your business objectives and your marketing goals necessarily. So it's important to have these different layers. And then it's important, as you spoke to earlier, to have an efficient way to grab those metrics. Because if it's inefficient, you're never going to do it consistently and it all falls apart. So you don't want to spend all of your time in analysis paralysis. You need to be able to actually do things, right?
This is it's kind of an interesting parameter here because we're talking about creating a matrix of information and parameters that you're going to measure your company on. And this is not something that can be changed every 3 months. I mean, you need a given longevity of the data to be able to figure out, are you improving? Are you losing? What are the things that are happening that are positive? So what do you see being the minimum of information from the standpoint of time lapse to be able to start drawing some conclusions?
Yeah, we like quarterly. So monthly would be your activity metrics. Like, if you were looking at the performance of your e-newsletter, right? You might look at that monthly whenever that goes out. But for your marketing scorecard and for business discussions, quarterly works best. And so imagine if you have baseline metrics of how you've performed in the past, and then you have your goals for each quarter, because you may have some seasonality to your quarters. I certainly do in my business, as most of our clients. So you set those targets quarterly, and then each quarter you discuss where did things go well, where did they not go well. So we like using the red, yellow, green, color coding. And then for those areas that aren't performing well, that's where you dive into your diagnostics to figure out why and whether or not you need to adjust your strategy for the next quarter or hold tight and just see how the next quarter goes. Because business doesn't stay static, as we know, it's a living thing. And so your marketing plan and even your scorecard needs to be reflective of, sometimes you need to make adjustments based on how the business is going.
And in fact, the interesting part is even the platforms evolve, right? If you looked at LinkedIn about a year and a half ago, before the pandemic went on, was very just strictly professional talk. Now we have way other things that are getting into that platform that are it's changing basically the content, the amount of information, even the perspective of what people look at or are looking for into a platform. I think we can do the same. Facebook has been through also some evolutions. If I would take even the press, the printed press, have been through some evolution about how I would say ads and information attracts or doesn't attract specific audiences. So there are some, not only from a business standpoint, seasonalities and changes of pattern, but there's also maturity of the different platforms and the way they evolve themselves.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we're just going through Google's algorithm changed, right? So, okay, our strategies need to adjust. At least sometimes we get warned ahead of time of these platform changes, and other times not. I really appreciate a little bit of warning on these. That we try our best to keep on top of it.
Not always easy, right?
No.
So also, if I think one of the big challenges people have is with these metrics is if you're coming into an organization where there haven't really been much data collection and data analysis, you're obviously trying to find where to start. But also, in many cases, people want to start then also maybe with a new website as well, because it's outdated. We need to bring everything up to date. What recommendations would you make to somebody in terms of metric collection and data collection when you're developing the new website, so that you can really keep on top of all these things as efficiently as possible?
Yes. Sometimes you have to make your best guess at what your baseline is if you don't have anything in place to measure. And that could be frustrating, but know that from there forward, you're going to be able to measure and change and adjust. So you're just looking at those positive effects of that redesign and what it can bring you. But there's a lot of industry benchmarks over, and you can find these in my book. So for example, what percentage of my traffic should come from organic, or what is a healthy open rate for my e-newsletter? So look to industry benchmarks if you don't have your own data, or even if you do and you're not sure, is this good? Is this bad? Those benchmarks can definitely help you, go down the path as you start to more personalize and get more personal with your own metrics.
And you were saying earlier as well that you use HubSpot. What sort of tools in that of that type are there on the market? And why do you use HubSpot and not an alternative?
Yeah. So HubSpot has built their business around small to medium-sized companies, and so it serves ourselves and our client base really well. So it's right sized to an organization that's, say, just starting out to. I don't know what their limit is. We usually work up to $500 million companies, so somewhere in that range. And within that, you can see a full life cycle of a customer's experience and all the data points along the way. So one of my favorite metrics that we can see is what types of marketing activities led to a sale. So it isn't to say there was no salesperson involved, but what content did they download? What pages did they visit? And you can start to see patterns of, people that download our research are more likely to purchase. Twice as likely is the ones that download our ebook on website redesigns, for instance. I'm making this up, but you can start to see, okay, what led to this? What were the first triggers? How do we first get this lead? So how can we, attribute marketing efforts towards that sale? And so without having a platform that knows that a sale occurred and knows that a lead turned into an opportunity or whatever, if you're completely disconnected, then you're losing a lot of analytics on the marketing side. And on the sales side, you're also losing insight into which pages they visit and what activities they're doing. And as the salesperson for my own company, I can tell you, boy, it's so valuable to know that, because now I can continue the conversation rather than come in cold. So HubSpot's not the only one that does this integrated view. It's just, for us, the tool that's easiest to use and really powerful to do all that we need to do to serve our clients. So
Wendy, thank you. I mean, this is a whole lot of information. There's so much more to talk about. We're already running out of time.
is it time already?
This is unbelievable. I mean, But I think for our audience, it's important to understand, first of all, there are guides and there are methodologies out there. And your book is a good example about what to do. And I really recommend for people to go and get that and dive into it and contact you via LinkedIn if they have questions, or if they can even potentially ask for your services to understand what is important and what kind of audience they have to talk to and how to measure the success and not be lost into tons of data just because it's data. And I always tell my clients, data is data, information is not data. Information
There
is
you
what you
go.
pull out of the data, right? And there's a big difference there. So really, I love it. Thank you so much for your time today with us.
This was so much fun. I enjoyed it. I think the three of us could talk measurement for many more hours, but this is a good talk. Thank you.
For sure, for sure. I think we'll have another episode, Stuart. It went way too fast, right?
As always, but I think it's good. It keeps us focused in the half hour and allows us to really focus in on those key questions that often come up when we're in conversation with people we're talking to and clients as well. So I think it's great, and it leaves plenty of room open for another episode.
And for sure, everybody who's watching on the Creative Minds, you can chat and ask questions, even if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube or on Vimeo. Just put some comments and questions in there. We will monitor those and we'll pass them on to Wendy if it makes sense. And I'm sure that she will take the time to answer. And also, now we're also on Apple Podcasts. So if you want to listen to the Creative Minds as you train, you go do your exercise, walk your dog, or cook in your kitchen, feel free to do so. I thank you very much for joining us today. And this was our 12th episode, and looking forward to many more. This is the Creative Minds. Stay in touch and subscribe to the channel. Have a great day. Bye.